you joining the divestment?
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm saying whoever doesn't, if we run out of people, send them over to divest.
Me too. Start passing away. Okay.
That is amazing.
And that's the only reason they survived was they had somebody told them whatever you do.
We can't wait for another storm and for more disasters to bring more damage to the city. We need to implement action. We need to implement hubs, information hubs. We need to have generators in place for when an emergency hits, we have backup energy. These things are taking too long to develop in the city, and we're demanding that these things be done now.
By Sandy survivors, I guess. Divest New York City sentenced to fossil fuels.
You're a star, Maggie.
Can you hold the banner more to say about it? Stand a little further down and say about it. It goes to right. There you go.
I love the color, but I just don't want to miss, for me, documenting stuff is most important. And so this line is not
por los caminos más lejanos, por los sueños que soñé, será reflejo de la
Eddie Batista from the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance.
And my co-MC Leslie Kagan from the People's Climate Movement of New York, and just about every progressive movement from the last 35 years. If I started right now, we would never leave, folks. So thank you all for coming. Here we are, late October, and it's another warm day. And we know why. Climate change is upon us. 5 years ago tomorrow, this city was visited by a severe weather event, the likes that we have never seen. And then this past summer and fall, we've seen hurricane after hurricane devastating the global south and communities of color throughout the lower parts of the United States. And we're joined here today by some folks from Houston, from Florida, from Miami, from Puerto Rico, from Haiti, who've come here to march in solidarity with the people here from New York who've suffered and lived through Sandy. So folks, we are here today to commemorate the dozens of lives that were lost, the hundreds and thousands of people that are still left to be made whole after Superstorm Sandy, and the millions still at risk from the impacts of climate change. Millions, disproportionately low-income communities and communities of color. So we're here today to send a message to the mayor, the governor, and 45, that we are here as an act of resistance, and we are going to march and we're going to fight to make sure that our communities are made safe and that we do everything possible to beat back the worst impacts of climate change.
Good morning, my name is Karen Blondell, and I'm an organizer with the Fifth Avenue Committee, a 39-year-old community development nonprofit in South Brooklyn. And I run the Turning the Tide Environmental Justice Group, T3 we're called. And I also live in Red Hook, which is a waterfront community in Brooklyn. And Red Hook was hit with Sandy on October 29th, 2012, and it completely destroyed our boilers and our electric systems. And we're still recuperating with challenges from that today. So one of the things I want to bring to everybody's attention is the fact that New York has a lot of waterfront, and we must protect our waterfront. So when I say climate, you say justice. Climate, justice. Climate, justice. And then secondly, we need to talk about energy in this community. Some of the causes for climate change is our use in energy. 70% of the buildings in New York City need to be retrofitted to reduce the energy usage. We're calling for a just transition to renewable energy like wind and solar. We're calling for jobs. These new energies will create jobs in our community. And we're calling for a just transition. We're asking the mayor and the governor to get on it now. We don't have time to waste. We had 2 hurricanes, 500-year storms affecting Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Texas, Florida, and we also have issues with fire in California. Those are all the beginnings of what's going to happen if we don't start buckling down with our energy use. So I'm here in support of Eddie Baptista and the EJA, and as well as WEAC and T3, the Lower East Side, Coley Allen, Far Rockaway, Red Hook, all of the communities that are here today to lift their voices and take action for a just transition to renewable energy.
Coconut Key, walk Kishuk, walk Nipahum, walk Olangwaywak, walk Pepetawik. My name is Al. I'm a member of the Ramapo Lenape Nation, and we are the descendants of the original people of New York. We are still here. Those words are from Muncie, one of the original languages of this place. We were once known as the grandfathers of this land. And what those words mean is, thank you, Great Spirit, thank you, from whose thoughts we arose, for giving us today the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, and thunder. It's a prayer for creation, it's a prayer of thanks, to bring us back to what really matters in this world, our relationships with each other. The sun, the air, the water, these are what are really valuable in this world. And in this modern industrial world, we tend to forget that. Not you all, I see that the people here are committed, it gives me hope. But we live in a world that takes our waters and our air for granted. We cannot do that anymore. We can see that with the disaster from the Sandy and the hurricanes there. So we need to get back to a place in time in which we value our earth and our waters. The 45th president wants to destroy the EPA. I can't think of any other madness than that. You can go ahead and get rid of the Clean Water Act. We cannot get rid of our need for clean water.
Woo! Woo! Right!
So whether he likes it or not, he's an environmentalist. You're an environmentalist. We're all environmentalists because we all need the waters, we all need the air, so we're all environmentalists. We set up a site called the Split Rock Sweetwater Prayer Site in solidarity with the Standing Rock people, who woke up this nation to the threats that these pipelines and the hydrofracking pose. I mean, they want to go ahead and build a pipeline through the Williams pipeline through this area. All pipelines leak, and we need to oppose these pipelines. We need to help save our waters and our airs. At the Split Rock Sweetwater site, I encourage you all to go to the Facebook and support what we're doing, because we're not only fighting for your water and our water, we're fighting for the water for everyone. The town of Mahwah wants to destroy us. They want to take our land. They're telling us we cannot even pray on our land that we have by private deed. And they're doing this because there are people in the community who own these $1 million homes that don't want us there. Sometimes I just think to myself, how is it that you can call us trespassing when we're on our ancestral lands? The trespassers we need to worry about are the poisons to our water and our air. That's the trespass we need to worry about. So I thank you all for allowing me to speak here. I just wanted to say, from the words that we got from the Standing Rock, Minnie Wachoni, water is life. Minnie Wachoni.
Minnie Wachoni.
Minnie Wachoni.
Minnie Wachoni.
Minnie Wachoni.
Minnie Wachoni.
Anashik, thank you. Anashik, Minnie Wachoni.
My name is Annie Willis, and I'm an intern at Food and Water Watch. I'm also a climate activist.
Yes.
Woo, you couldn't. Food and Water Watch works to create a healthy and safe environment and a sustainable future for our families. So I was born and raised in Far Rockaway. I lived in a one-family home with my mother, brother, and my dog, whose name is Sandy, ironically. As a child, I remember going to the beaches with my family and friends and always having a good time. On October 29th, 2012, my life changed. I remember the news telling us to evacuate, but we decided to stay because we weren't impacted by Irene. That night, I witnessed the pitch black water surge above cars come to my doorstep. I witnessed the broken window sound, the gushing of water in my basement. At 15, I felt hopeless. And that night, I knew that our lives would never be the same. After Sandy, we stayed in a cramped hotel room in Queens. I spent most of my high school career in a hotel room. After Sandy, I also witnessed, after 2 weeks, we had no hot water, no electricity, or heat. I think the hardest challenge after Sandy was getting my mental health back. I battled through depression, and all my family members went through mental battles of their own. Climate change disproportionately impacts children, low income, and minorities. This is why I'm asking the city to get survivors back in their homes. And also to create homes that are as resilient as New Yorkers and weather the storms. Today we are experiencing extreme weather-related events like hurricanes, droughts, fires, mudslides. We must work to combat climate change and protect the future generation. We have to show our collective power and demand Mayor de Blasio, Governor Cuomo, and Chuck Schumer to be champions of bold climate actions and to commit New York City and the rest of the nation to 100% renewable energy. We remember the lives that was lost by Sandy. We remember the hospitals shutting down. We remember not having lights, heat, or electricity. We remember. We resist. We resist the notion that storms like Sandy are normal. We resist the climate deniers in the White House.
Yeah.
We rise. We rise against injustice. We rise against racism. We rise by holding our elected officials accountable. We rise by making sure that those elected officials support getting off fossil fuels and going green, 100% renewable energy. We rise by going out to vote, November 7th, y'all. We organize, we speak out, and we march. We remember, we resist, and we rise.
My daughter was only 6 years old. I almost lost my daughter. I was home in Bed-Stuy, not the red zone, nothing. I heard a cracking noise. And I got scared. I took my daughter out of her bed and the ceiling caved in on her bed. To this day, she goes to therapy. She cries to me every time it rains hard, saying, "Mommy, is it gonna happen again? Are we gonna live? Or are we gonna die?" And I want people to know, without sleep, I'm still here fighting. Fighting. And it's hard. Even 5 years later, we're still struggling. As all the attention shifts to the next hurricane, we'll keep forgetting the victims from the last one. Victims like myself, my family, people we've lost, the elderly, the young. We cannot forget them. People that are traumatized, like my daughter, that's going through it now. And I'm here to talk about what the mayor and the controller can do right now to prevent the next Sandy. The New York City Pension Fund, which they control, are handling over billions of dollars of our money to corporations like Exxon. The same corporations whose business model will flood our cities. Or should I say drown our cities. Divesting from fossil fuels is important, is the first major step that they can take fighting towards the next hurricane that will hit New York. They can't just respond to an emergency after the hurricane hits. They must be proactive and take action yesterday to reduce the carbon pollution. It is time for Mayor de Blasio and Controller Scott well, you know who he is, who manages our investment funds to divest from corporations like Exxon and all fossil fuels.
That's right!
And we just got some really good news. Public advocate Tish James, who is a champion on fighting climate change, is now calling a public hearing on how New York City should fight climate change, and we're going. We're all going. That's right. We're all going as a community to make this hearing about divestment. Together, we're going to say, Mayor de Blasio and Controller Stringer, it is time to divest. Now, help me chant so City Hall can hear us. I'm going to say Scott Stringer. You're going to say the verse now. Scott Stringer. Divest now. Scott Stringer. Divest now. Scott Stringer. Divest now. Now I'm going to say Bill de Blasio, and y'all going to say the verse now. Bill de Blasio. Divest now. Bill de Blasio. Divest now. Bill de Blasio. Divest now. Thank you.
As young people of color living in these waterfront communities, we're going to be the first ones to feel the effects of climate change in our communities. This means more intense hurricanes, hotter summers, and crazier weather overall.
However, as young people living within these low-income waterfront communities, we're able to actively develop solutions to better our communities. Some of these solutions are greener and healthier waterfront for all, and ensuring that there are 100% renewable and sustainable sources of energy, such as solar and wind power. We mustn't wait for another natural disaster like Sandy to strike us. We remember, we resist, we rise.
Come on, you guys, chant. We remember, we resist, we rise.
We remember, we resist, we rise. Thank you.
Andrew Cuomo, we call on him to support the movement of New York State on a fast track to 100% renewable energy. It is shameful that New York State only gets about 3% of its current energy from solar and wind. We cannot tolerate that. Now is the time to pass the legislation to move New York State off of fossil fuels and into 100% renewable energy. This state needs to start charging those corporations that are polluting our air and our water and our neighborhoods.
2 years ago was the 10-year commemoration of Hurricane Katrina. As an act of solidarity, a delegation of New Yorkers, Sandy survivors, went and marched with the survivors of Katrina to commemorate not just their 10-year struggle, but to acknowledge and to celebrate our solidarity with each other in these hazardous times. And as folks would know, folks from the Global South know how to return a favor. So joining us today, and we want to give a quick shout out to some of them. From Haiti, we have Rico Jean-Pierre from PAPPD, Grassroots International. From Houston, we have Juan Parras from Tejas. From Catalyst Miami, we have Moma Malangon. And representing the Global South and coming at a time of great rebuilding problems as well, we're honored to be joined by Jesus Vázquez from Organización Boricua from Puerto Rico. Jesus.
Okay, so compañeros y compañeras, I just want to say hi on behalf of a lot of social justice groups in Puerto Rico that are holding on and resolving the issues by themselves. I just want to say that it's very weird for me. It's the first time that I get out of Puerto Rico since Hurricane Maria hit us. So it's kind of surreal to see kind of normality, you know. And but this is a beautiful picture, and I just want to say that the people in Puerto Rico are doing all of they can to resolve their own issues. We have a militarized Puerto Rico right now that we're denouncing. Puerto Ricans have been also struggling in Lucha for denouncing the colonial state that we're living. So right now we're feeling all of those issues again. And the people again has to be the ones, the actors, the communities that got impacted hard, the ones that are resolving their own issues as always. So I just want to give a big shout out to Puerto Rican communities in the US. You guys have... Mira, ustedes, los puertorriqueños y puertorriqueñas de la comunidad de la diáspora en Estados Unidos, nos han dado el abrazo más grande, ¿no? Ustedes nos estuvieron protegiendo antes del huracán, durante el huracán, y fueron los primeros que respondieron antes que cualquier institución de gobierno. So I just want to say Puerto Rican communities in the US and also internationally, we're the first to respond to Puerto Ricans' needs from the people, from pueblo to pueblo. I just want to give also a quick shout out to the CJA, Climate Justice Alliance. They've been working with us very closely to maintain that support. And even though in Puerto Rico we don't have access to electricity, and the thing in the context in the rural communities in the central part of the island, in La Cordillera Central, there's no access to water, and we have a lot of problems. People are resolving their issues. There are hubs everywhere, and we're just keep doing what we were doing, but we really appreciate this solidarity, and we stand with you also during this day, so thank you.
It's a beautiful day here in the park, right? My name is Pat Kane. I'm the treasurer of the New York State Nurses Association. Thank you. But I'm really here to talk to you today as a registered nurse who lives and works on Staten Island. My hospital is in the flood zone. It's one of 3 hospitals that we have on Staten Island, serving over 500,000 people. 2 of our hospitals, in fact, are in the flood zone, and we were right in the middle of the hardest hit areas in our city. That night we watched the waters rise as the bay that's a mile away actually came up to the front doors of the hospital. We saw cars floating by. Our emergency responders were out on the street rescuing patients as they first waited and then actually had to swim to our doors to seek safety from the storm. As the night dragged on, the ER filled up with the injured and our lobbies were crowded with people seeking shelter. During the night and in the days that followed, we had a lot of challenges inside our facilities as some of our systems went down, but we were actually lucky. Other hospitals weren't as lucky as we were. For the first time in its more than 150-year history, Bellevue Hospital had to be evacuated. And the staff accomplished this harrowing feat without any patient suffering any harm. Thank you. They deserve it. Coney Island Hospital had so many outages that they had to be sidelined. And as challenging as things got inside, what we saw outside was even more challenging. The destruction and wreckage that represented people's lives, the piles of debris and personal belongings, cars and even boats strewn all over Staten Island, haphazardly on the streets. And there was that sandy air that people remember, the thickness in the air, the smell of decay and petrochemicals. Even though we went around with masks, we all had sandy cough, in the community and the workers as well. As disturbing as the physical devastation was, the unmet needs of the affected residents was even more so. So after we finished our shifts at the hospital, we responded to that call. We went house to house, apartment to apartment in the hardest hit communities, helping people in need, people that needed critical medications, people that needed care, and people that needed help to recover from the trauma they had been through. We convinced ambulances that were just kind of sitting in wait in recovery centers to take us out into those neighborhoods. We brought our RV down from Albany, and that served as a mobile health unit on Staten Island. We administered first aid and tetanus boosters to the workers, assessed health problems in the community, and coordinated our efforts at the various hubs with other volunteer groups. We also worked side by side with our brothers and sisters in other unions, and I just want to give a shout out to labor, who played a really strong role in the recovery and response to Sandy, and is still doing that today throughout our country. You know, all of our unions, our first responders, our transit workers, communication workers, our teachers, I see PSA in the house. Yeah. And of course 1199, who is always by our side. Today we also mourn the 25 lives lost to Sandy from Staten Island. 2 young boys, Connor and Brandon, who were torn from the safety of their mother's arms. John and John Jr., who died embracing one another. Patricia, who lost her daughter and husband George that night, and all the rest. But the Staten Island communities that were devastated 5 years ago don't just remember Hurricane Sandy on this anniversary, they actually continue to live in its aftermath. People still aren't home. Full recovery is yet to be accomplished, and we call on the authorities. Thank you. I hope they heard that. We call on the authorities to continue to assist those families. The resiliency projects that were conceived to protect us, many of them haven't even got started. A seawall that was supposed to be offshore in the hardest hit area hasn't even started yet. Rows of condemned houses that were supposed to be turned into natural lands are still standing. Meanwhile, overdevelopment continues on Staten Island in marshy areas, and we have the Williams Pipeline coming that's going to bring fracked gas within miles of our South Shore. Pipeline! That's right, no pipeline. Sadly, extreme weather events are now a very present and tangible part of how we plan for the public's health. These are just some of the reasons why we joined New York Renews and the whole coalition in strong support for the Climate and Community Protection Act before the state legislature. Yeah. That's right. So relief and recovery has become an essential part of what NYSNA does. Our nurses were in Texas, in Florida, and continue to help recovery there. We pack supplies for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and our nurses in Puerto Rico continue to provide medical assistance as we speak. In fact, our NYSNA president, Judy Sheridan Gonzalez, and we have her on the line right now.
The policies of the governments and the ruling class have affected the lives of our people and your people. It's just one world, it's just one nation. We are with you, we are in solidarity with you, and we really appreciate that you are here with us too. Thank you. Thank you, Mercedes. Now I'd like to introduce
you know, at bottom, this is about love, and this is about lives. This is about our future. And in honor of the victims of climate change and climate racism and injustice, from Puerto Rico to the global South, to Brooklyn, Staten Island, the Bronx, and Queens, we ask for all to make a moment of silence for the victims of Sandy and all other climate cataclysms. A moment of silence, please. Thank you. But climate denier-in-chief presents a clear and present danger, not just for the United States, but for the world. dismantling the EPA, removing even mention of climate change from sciences. This is an outright assault that's why it's all so much more important for all of us to be here today, because every time we stand up, we send a message that these kinds of regressive policies will not stand. But there's more that can be done. Even with a reactionary administration, we have local government that should be responsive to us. You heard Leslie mention the responsibility that Governor Cuomo owes New Yorkers to move to 100% renewable energy by 2050, not 30% by 30 or whatever other mix we're talking about. Similarly, here in New York City, Mayor de Blasio recently proposed a building retrofit plan, but it really wasn't a retrofit plan. When you talk about New York City's climate impacts, its greenhouse gas emissions, 70% are from the city's buildings. His recent plan proposed would only limit about 7% of the city's greenhouse gas emissions. Now, a 7% solution may work for Sherlock Holmes, but not New York City, right? So we're here also to demand Mayor de Blasio work with the City Council to look at a widespread, mandatory building retrofit for all of New York City. You've heard about divestment, and we're going to talk about that later. Before we go any further, I want to introduce another community leader, someone who's been working for years and worked diligently during the Sandy recovery in the Lower East Side. Damaris Reyes, good old Lower East Side.
This is such a beautiful sight to see. I know we just had a moment of silence, but I want to pick this up with a little bit of energy, so I'm going to start with a really quick chant that I think embodies what we can do when we're all together. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. The people united will never be defeated. So my name is Damaris Reyes. I'm the executive director of Good Old Lower East Side and also one of the founding members of LES Ready. See my nice little swanky vest? I'm not gonna take you through all the details of everything we did because like many of the communities that are here today, we were the first on the ground in our neighborhood, you know, responding, looking out, walking up, you know, 26 flights of stairs, trying to make sure that we could find the most vulnerable and get them the relief that they needed. Like many others who are here today from around the city, our community also has very specific vulnerabilities. We're waterfront, we're near a power plant, we have a pumping station, and all of our waterfront, nearly all of it is lined with public housing. So the most vulnerable live near the water, and we are in Zone 1 and Zone 2. During Sandy, we were able to reach 15,000 people with relief services. I'm sorry, households. This was not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination. And we walked away from that very traumatized, in fact. My building was surrounded by water and we didn't have power, heat. You know this story because you've heard it a million times. And the one thing that we learned from Sandy was that we had been fighting for so long against greedy landlords and luxury developers to protect our community. We never thought that we would have to fight to protect our community from weather events and climate change. This was a new thing for us, a completely new revelation. But we took that challenge on. We really took that challenge on. And so we formed our network, LES Ready. You know, we've been working on a plan, we've been doing all kinds of stuff to really try to think, you know, ahead for the future, to make sure that our community could be resilient in the face of any future disaster. But here we are 5 years later. And even with all the wins that we have had in our neighborhood, because we were awarded these huge sums of money to do flood protection, money to set up disaster centers, none of it has happened yet. And so for us, what we are seeing and what we are learning from everything that is happening around the world and in Puerto Rico and in the Caribbean, if that were to be us, if we were to have Maria come here, this city would be devastated. And so while we might think we're better prepared, and while we might know a little bit more about how to create a disaster plan, if we got hit by a disaster tomorrow, we would not be ready. And so 5 years is way too much. So we believe that what we really need to be doing is that we need to be working on our infrastructure improvements. We're calling on the city, the state, to make sure that the repairs in public housing and the remaining homes and NYCHA are done. We're calling on the administration to make sure that they halt any development on the waterfront areas until cohesive climate assessments can be integrated. Right now they're planning all over the place, but nobody's really thinking about what does all this development mean in the face of, a disaster. We're calling on the administration to create flood protection, a flood protection plan for the entire New York City shoreline. We're also calling on the administration to recognize leadership in communities. We are the first on the ground. We know our community well. When we were hit by Sandy, we had no power, we had nothing. But what we did have was a know-how, and we knew our neighborhood very well, and we were able to direct everyone who came to help us to places that needed help. And then we also are calling on our administration to stop contributing to the problems that fracture our resiliency. We don't have any more time to waste. 5 years is way too much. We've got to get this ball rolling. So we've got to get through the red tape. We've got to make sure that if a disaster comes to this city again, we will be not just prepared because we have a plan and we know how to evacuate, but that we will be ready to endure whatever happens in this city. We cannot have another Sandy, and we definitely cannot have another Maria. And I just want to close by saying, I'm Puerto Rican, and everybody, I'm not going to take you there, are great people, wonderful leaders really planning and working and trying to drive donations and trying to think about rebuilding efforts. Some of those people are here today, like Elizabeth Jean-Pierre. You need to get involved with this cause. You need to lend yourself to this cause. You need to support the people that are on the front lines and trying to help Puerto Rico. They are going to sell our island. That is what they want. They want us out of there. So I ask you all to get involved, donate, lend your body, your expertise to both pushing an agenda here in New York City for a just recovery and for places like Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and all of the Caribbean. And I'm over time, so thank you. And remember, el pueblo unido jamás será vencido.
Thank you.
Rise up, New York City, let us rise, rise, rise. Rise up, New York City, let us rise. If you remember how it felt, we remember how it felt when the storm was in the sky. So we resist the fossil fuel spreading in on our say, rise up, New York City, let us rise, rise, rise.
You go, girls! Woo! The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. Now! Justice! Now! Justice! Now! Fight, fight, fight!
Can I just see some movements on our
Pollution is enough. Our world needs to grow. Pollution is enough. Our world needs to grow. It's hot in here.
breathe. We need to 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 breathe. We only got our planet. I said we only got our planet. I said we. The planet's on fire. They don't need no water. Corporations burn us as a planet. The planet's on fire. They don't need no water. Corporations burn us as a We are unstoppable!
Sonia.